Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the IIT Delhi Fest organized by IIT Delhi Alumni Association as a part of the IIT Delhi Diamond Jubilee celebration. My name is Natasha Angural. I am the IIT Delhi Alumni BTech batch of 2015. I am currently working as Senior Manager in Quantitative Services at Bank of America. I am an EC member at IIT Delhi Alumni Association and the convener of the subcommittee for virtual meetings and private networks. Beginning with the event for this afternoon, Sahara, from deserted to supported. Our speaker for this talk will be Sunena Gupta. Sunena Gupta is a youth mental health advocate and director of the Umeed Colors of Hope dance theatre production and awareness campaign. Umeed was launched in 2018 and has since run 15 performances across the US, UK, India, and Singapore, raising over $50,000 for youth suicide prevention programs. Sunena creatively uses dance to introduce young adults, teachers, leaders, and parents to issues surrounding mental health. She speaks and presents for international mental health organizations and educational institutes to advocate the implementation of appropriate policies, resources, and youth membership programs. Sunena is a full-time public policy researcher at the Asia Competitiveness Institute, LKY School of Public Policy, NUS. She is also an internationally acclaimed Indian classical dancer, performer, choreographer, and teacher. Welcome to the forum, Sunena. I hand over to begin the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me and thank you for the introduction. So as I said, I'm Sunena Gupta and I've been working in mental health advocacy for the past few years. And so today the talk is really just about spreading more awareness, kind of introducing everyone to the topic of mental health, how you can support yourself or the people around you in your community. And so I have actually studied public policy and political economy. Not psychology. So the perspective that I give during my talks and my campaigns is more of my personal experiences with mental health, both within my own life and in those around me. And so I speak more as just a daughter, a friend, a student, and employee. And so I hope that my perspectives will help you in supporting your own community in terms of mental well being. So I'll just share my slides for today. Okay. Okay, so is this visible?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So the talk for today, I've titled it Sahara from Deserted to Supported. And it's a little play on words because Sahara, so when you first think about it, you might think of Sahara Desert. And Sahara also in Hindi will mean support. And so this is really about the journey of someone who's experiencing mental illness. When they start off, you can feel very deserted and lonely, but my goal with my talks and seminars is to kind of show everyone how you can make that transition from feeling deserted to feeling supported. And if you know someone who's experiencing mental illness or mental health issues, then how you can help them make that transition. So as Natasha mentioned, I've been doing, so normally I would have loved to come to IIT Delhi and to perform. And actually, this talk is very special for me out of all my talks because my father actually went to IIT Delhi and so did my Tauji. So this one is extra special for me for BTech. And so, yeah, I would have loved to come and actually perform. As she said, I'm a Kathak dancer, but instead today I'll be sharing short clips from my production because I think it's more effective to show the emotions that people go through when experiencing mental illness. And in between, I'll be sharing a little pieces of information to guide us through. So I hope you enjoy it. So my this is my experience with my mental health campaign. It was featured recently in the Times of India. So as I said, I talk from my own experiences and how I've kind of built this production and this campaign. And I hope that the sharing of my own journey will mean something to all of you. So we'll start off with the first section, which is the start of any journey when you're a happy person. We'll, you don't really know much about mental health, at least for me. In my education, it wasn't such a prominent part of my education. I think that's very common for all of us, that it wasn't really a topic that was introduced. So let me just begin there. Okay, I'll stop that there. So the first part I want to talk about is, as I mentioned, this was like in my personal journey before I knew what mental health issues were. And so it's important for us to start in terms of recognizing the signs of mental illness. So here, perhaps you've seen a similar infographic that explains different types of signs that you might be able to look out for, and why I think it's important for us all to learn about this, whether you've noticed it within yourself or others, is because the lack of knowledge and education of mental illness is probably the biggest barrier that people face in terms of seeking help and becoming their fuller self. And so, personally, I would say out of these, it was more of the little things that I experienced during when I had issues with my own mental health. More things like, in terms of sleep, for example, either sleeping too much or not being able to sleep at all, or daily activities like not wanting to go meet my friends, not wanting to go for classes in university, things like that. Or even with eating, irregular eating habits. So it's basically sometimes it can be more severe symptoms that will show up, but it's important for us to recognize, like in our own families and communities, if someone is experiencing even little patterns, differences from their normal behavior, that those can be early signs of mental health issues. And the earlier they recognize, as with everything, it's the same thing as physical illness. I would say that it's the earlier that you're able to recognize it, the earlier you're able to overcome and treat it. Um, and so, yeah, so take a look at these symptoms. And as I said, I can even be the most basic, simple differences in someone's behavior that can be early signs. Um, yeah, and so then the next thing that I would move on to, the next part of my production was, okay, so once you realize that you're going through these signs, things seem different, but there's a lot of confusion and anger, like, why is this happening to me? Why am I experiencing these changes in my behavior? As I said, personally, I did not know that much about mental health. So it was more like, why am I not able to eat, sleep, and go be social as I normally am? And so, what doctors and mental health professionals would say is that if you observe these signs for over 3 weeks to a month, that means it is something more severe than just like a phase in your life where you're not feeling too great. So that's where you make the distinction between just a phase and into a more long-term mental health issue. And so, yeah, as I said, personally, it was a lot of anger and confusion. And so that's the next part that I talk about. Yeah. So that was what I was saying was the anger part that happens. And so next I want to move into more of the education part. So one thing that's a big issue is there's a lot of myths and we have to kind of debunk them with the actual facts, because that's one big barrier in our societies that stops us from seeking the support that we need and making that transition from feeling very deserted to feeling supportive. And so here I've outlined about 5 or 6 of the most common myths, and we'll just go through them quickly. So the first one is that mental illness means that you're crazy. And so I've written that's not crazy, but more of a vulnerable situation. And it's the same as physical illness in terms that it has several symptoms that you just have to look out for and treat. So the more that we can, as a community, make that comparison between mental illness and physical illness, the more that we can support people that need it. And next one is mental illness equals violent and dangerous. Again, this is a myth largely created by the media. And I put some stats here, but it's definitely not a common, like a common symptom of absolutely everyone who has mental illnesses. And the next one is mental illness equals moody. And so while for certain different types of illnesses, there's a whole spectrum that can go from depression, anxiety to more severe and different types of mental illnesses. As I said, there's differences with energy, sleep, eating irregularities, but they're more of cycles that there's a lot of this common notion that it flips like between moments, but it's more over larger periods of time, which is why it's important to think back at the signs that I displayed earlier, and think about like how you're changing over a period of weeks or months. And then the next one is that mental illness is a direct result of an extremely intense and traumatic incident. And so there isn't always a root cause or event, and more commonly than not, there isn't. It can just be a series of behavior or different changes in your life, and it can literally just come up at any time, and it's totally normal. So the more we talk about it, the more that we can normalize it. And it's not, a lot of people will think that, oh, it has to be because of like one specific event or something that's happened, and that's why it's a trigger, and which is not always the case, and especially for those illnesses that are more chronic, which can be over time. And a lot of the time, they can even be rooted back to when you were a child. So it really is like a long lifetime thing. And there's really nothing to be ashamed of or worried about in that sense. It's, as I'll discuss more of in this talk, it's always something that you can overcome. And then the next one is that psychiatric medication is an easy way out. And so this is something that came up a lot when I did talks live. There's always like a generational gap, and people are sometimes reluctant to seek medication. But as I said, again, the more that we can normalize it and compare it to physical illnesses, sometimes you can require medication. But that being said, medication isn't the only solution. It's often not the first step that you would go to. There's other things that you can do for yourself within your community. And then there's different treatments like therapy as well. But it definitely isn't an easy way out. It's a big decision for the person who's taking it. And it's more complicated in terms of that there's many different illnesses. Some are more appropriate to be treated with medication versus others. And then the last one that I put is that seeking help will deteriorate your symptoms further. So this is something that I've heard as well, is that if you are going to seek help, that means you're acknowledging it. And so you're getting more deeper into it, and you're going to only experience it worse. And so this is definitely not true, because like, for example, if I want to give the example of therapy as a treatment, when you go to see a therapist, when things are tough, then you're going to be talking about it, but that's how you're actually overcoming it. And they'll be able to help you and assist you in going and seeking out, like, what are your triggers, what is the root of the issue, what is affecting you the most, and how to overcome it. When sometimes people might think that, it's better if you just avoid it or leave it for later, but that would actually deteriorate your symptoms without you knowing it more. So these are just some of the common myths versus fact. There's a lot more, and that's a big reason why I do these talks, is to kind of mitigate the stigma and wrong information out there about mental illness. And yeah, and like another big reason why I do these talks is because I'm definitely like I go around and like before I perform on international platforms, I speak on international platforms, I've done my full education and I work in a job I like. So, but I can also stand here and say that I have experienced mental health issues in the past. So none of these things would apply to me. I'm not crazy. I'm not none of that. So it's important for me to share these things so that it's as an example of, yeah, you can go through a tough mental health journey, but you can still be very successful in everything that you do. So the next part is the first part of our title, I guess, which is deserted. And so this is one of the most impactful parts of the production that I share, because it really kind of helps you to get inside the head of someone experiencing some of the symptoms that I've spoken of before. So here it is.
I'm frightened to go out, to touch, or to see anything. I want to close every door and push everyone away. I am not hungry, and I am so exhausted, yet I can't sleep. They say that the darkest hour is before the dawn of hope. But where is the hope? I see only darkness within me, darkness surrounding me, seamless darkness.
Each day, as the evening starts to set, the ache builds in her chest. She knows that she must go to bed and try to get some rest. She without a sound. Others see her in the day and think she's doing well. But every day, as the evening sets, she enters her own hell.
Okay, so that's that. So the next part I want to go through is, so as you can tell from that part, one of the things that people will experience the most is a lot of loneliness, confusion, not really knowing what's going on. And a lot of the time you just don't know where to start in terms of seeking support. And that's and a big part of that is the community notions, and as I call them, barriers to seeking different types of treatment. And this treatment can be community treatment, self-treatment, therapy, medication. There's a whole different variety. But there's some barriers that will stop people from doing that. And so the more that we can recognize that, the more we can break them down and help people seek the support that they have. So I'll start at the bottom here. So we have mental state, illness, and medication effects. So a lot of the time, the illness itself or the issues that you're going through itself, the symptoms, that can stop you from wanting to go book that appointment or go share that information with a friend or family member, because you are going through confusion yourself. You might be, like I said, one big thing for me is that I used to be like very social, outgoing. I was in a lot of different types of activities and things, but you might kind of be more reserved, withdraw from these things. So you might not be wanting to go out and meet people as much. And so, which is why it's really important for us to recognize these symptoms in our community so that you can kind of nudge the person a little bit more. And so one big thing was that for me, my parents really recognized these changes in my behavior. And so they were able to kind of encourage me to go seek help, go talk to a mental health professional and support me in that way. And that was probably the most instrumental part of my journey in terms of recognizing what I was going through. So you sometimes need an external person, but that being said, if you do recognize a family friend, family member, a friend or colleague or whoever it is, the worst thing you can do is really push them really hard in that situation and can overwhelm them with a lot of information. The best thing to do is say that I've noticed that you're going through something different. Things seem different with you. You have some changed behavior patterns, and that's totally fine. I just want to say that I'm here for you. I can support you when these are the things that I've heard of that help. If you want to try, then I'm happy to support you. So that would be a lot more effective than often we feel like we have to push someone to go see the doctor or do this or that or whatever we've heard, but it's the approach that you take in terms of supporting someone is very, very important. So the next one on the right side is time constraints on physician or patient. A lot of the time, one of the most common things I hear from people is that I don't have time to go for therapy. I don't have time to deal with this at all. Like it's because you feel like it's might not be something that you can see. It's not the same as a physical illness in terms of you can't see it. So you might think, okay, I don't have time. It's just in my head. I just have to get over it. Or you keep pushing it aside. And in that way, it builds up. So I would strongly encourage that time constraint, that is something you just have to take out the time. So the more, like, especially for one big thing, like amongst IIT alumni, is that a lot of you become leaders, managers, especially in the workplace and things, being able to recognize this amongst your employees and making a mental health friendly space amongst your team or colleagues is really important, so that someone can come up to you and say that I have to take time off for this appointment, and your response will make a really, really big difference and impact to them. And then on the top is more cultural barriers. So the language, your race, your gender differences. So personally, for me, when I was seeking a therapy appointment, it was really important for me to go to someone who I felt represented by, because, and by that, I mean another Indian woman therapist. And because in that way, sometimes it will, you just save a lot of emotional energy and time in terms of when you go to the appointment, because you don't have to explain things like your cultural background or your family background or dynamics in that sense, because they would have gone through a similar kind of experience maybe. So it does help to go to someone that you feel more represented by, so that you don't have to, in the middle of explaining your own story, you don't have to then go into these nuances of this is how my family works, this is how my culture works and things like that. So that's often a really, really big barrier for people. So then the next section is when we go into the more like coming out of the mental health issues that that someone might go through. It's more of a rejuvenating phase, and we'll now transition more into like, okay, what can we do to some tangible tips to help the people around us. Okay, so stop there. And so I said now we're kind of transitioning to the next part. So what I call coping techniques is what we'll go into. And so with sharing this is something that might help you, but it's also something that I would encourage that you share with people around you if you think it can be useful to them. So the first one is for coping techniques, there's immediate techniques, and then there's more long-term techniques. So one thing that's really, really common that mental health professionals will talk about is this technique called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 coping technique, also known as the grounding technique. And so this is really, really useful for in the moment when you're experiencing something really stressful, you're in a really panicky state, and it's something that you can do anywhere. If you're at work or wherever you are in any type of gathering, you can just take 1 minute to do this in your head. So in this, you do 5 things that you have to basically just take deep breaths and actively notice 5 things that you can see around you, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell and 1 thing that you can taste. And so with this, the reason why this is effective is that it's bringing you to all your senses in the moment, and it calms you down within that minute. And it's something that I would encourage that you try and definitely share with people around you, because it's really, really effective, and you can do it as many times as you want. And it's really something that you can do in any situation. It's pretty fast and effective, and engages all your senses. So that's for immediate. But what I try to talk about a lot is that a lot of the time for these mental health issues, we are acting in a reactive manner rather than preventive. And the more that we can make that shift, the more effective our responses can be. Because you don't want to be waiting until something happens to you, until you're noticing the signs that I spoke about earlier, or that you're feeling really down, things feel really weird to you. You don't want to be waiting until that point and then react. If we can act ahead of time and think of more preventive measures, it can be a lot more sustainable, a lot more useful for all of us. And so that's what I'm going to share 3 of those things that I've said, write them down, but you can just think about it also. So one thing is what we call the comfort list, is that same thing with these sensory categories: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. Think of things that really help you feel good, and engage in these senses under each category. And I put some examples here, and think about how many of these do you regularly get to practice, and which ones do you wish that you would be able to practice more. So it's important to think about these, because in the moment when if you are experiencing mental health issues, or you are, it doesn't even have to be an illness per se, but just when things seem really tough, at least you have a set list of things that you've thought of, that, okay, these things instantly bring me joy, make me feel good. These are the kind of people that I like talking to. These are the things that I do just for yourself. And it shouldn't be related to anything to do with your education or work experiences. It should just be things that purely bring you joy and peace. And then next is what we call the inventory. And this is the people that offer you support. And so this is really important to think of, because it's just people that you think that you can really trust. And I've written down a few different types of groups that you can think of. And because ultimately we're social beings, and you do need to be able to share things with the people around you. And it's good to kind of sit down and acknowledge and think of, okay, who can I approach at any time? Who do I think I can authentically and genuinely share my experiences and thoughts with? And the last one is the energy list, which is 2 lists. And again, all of these can be, it's useful to write them down, but you can also just think of it in your head when you go for a walk or anything. Lists of people that you devote your energy to, and that you gain your energy from. And this is really, really effective in working environments, to think about, okay, what kind of tasks or people or things that I work on do I devote most of my energy to? And then what do you gain your energy from? And ideally, we want them to be mutual. Like, for example, for university students, a lot of the time they would write down like, okay, this class drains a lot of my energy. But if it's not in the other list as well, in terms of what you get out of it, then it's something that you should think about, like, okay, why am I taking this class? What is it serving me? If it's not something that is passionate for you, or something that you really enjoy or feel is productive or fruitful to the environment around you. So these are just 3 things that I think of. And as I said earlier, that the thing about IIT is a lot of you become really impactful and influential leaders and managers. And so it's important to think about these things in the context of the work environment that you create for your team and for your colleagues, for your office, and think about how you can incorporate these kind of thoughts into that work environment, because it just makes it a lot more healthy and productive for everyone. And so now that brings us to the last part of our thing. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a quick snippet of the last part that I presented in my production, which is meant to be so it's called Umeed Colors of Hope. And so it's meant to be the transition of colors to this last part, which is meant to be very colorful because ultimately what I say is, and the title of the production is Colors of Hope, is that it's totally fine. Mental health issues are totally fine. You can still go through life, be very successful person. And it's just really, honestly, just a matter of managing your symptoms, recognizing them, and things can come up at any point in time. There's like so many statistics around that state about how many people actually go seek mental health help, and how many people have symptoms but don't do that. And so I hope the things that I've talked about today will make you think about these things more, and kind of help to destigmatize the issue, normalize the conversation, and will help you to kind of incorporate it into your family, community, and work and social lives. And so the last slide that I have here is to learn more. I've just put some of my favorite podcasts, books, social media accounts, and my own links to the first is my WordPress website, where I write a lot about these about different types of topics in mental health, and my YouTube channel, that if you enjoyed the videos, there's a lot more there, fuller videos that you can watch. And so this is just next steps in case you are interested in learning more about it. And yeah, I can conclude there and hand it over to Natasha if there's any questions or comments to share.
Thank you so much, Sunena, for your time. I think the presentation was really helpful, and the video is live streaming on YouTube, and I think it will be helpful. And currently there are no questions, but yeah, I think you have provided the links. If there are any questions, people can reach out. So that will be it for today's event. So any concluding remarks from you?
Yeah, well, first of all, just thank you all again, everyone who's watching, and to you, the whole Alumni Association, and to Mr. Shukla for inviting me for this talk. As I said, I would have loved to come and in person be able to perform and share this, but hopefully for another time. And I hope sharing this means something to all of you as it did to me. So thank you very much.
Definitely, yes. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining.